Hey, hello in Felcha. This is Sunday, October 11, 2020. And this is David McDonnell, your host for Random Thoughts from County Antrim. And I indeed have in store for you today some random thoughts. I told you, I think, last couple of weeks, I'm redoing my website. The company that acts as my platform for my website suddenly went out of business. They announced that it was shutting down. I had almost no notice, so I had to scramble around to find a new platform. And I discovered I couldn't simply transfer everything that was on that platform, that service, and put it on another platform. So I needed to completely redo my website, which is okay because I think my website was overdue for some updates. Now the problem is the transition. I can't go to my old website and update it. I have to wait for the new website to go live, and hopefully that'll be another week or so. But it's not yet there. In the meantime, you cannot go to my website and find links to this podcast or to prior podcasts. At least no podcast since August 30th. So if you missed one of my podcasts or two in September or thus far in October, then, well, first of all, shame on you for missing it. But to see them, you have two choices. One is to go on YouTube. In the search box up at the top of the YouTube page, type in that search box, Clandonnell, Clandonnell. You can see it written on the back of my book. And then you can scroll down, whatever it pops up when you type in Clandonnell in the search box, and you'll find a whole bunch of my videos and my podcast. Now, the first thing, I just retested this, and the first thing that pops up when you do that is a picture of a goat. Now, that's a photo taken in County in County Antrim in Northern Ireland. And when I saw this goat, it was tethered to a stake in a small grassy area in front of a small hotel. And I spent some time with the owner of the hotel one day, and I commented to him, among other things, about his goat. And he told me in his gruff voice, he said, "That's not a goat. That's me lawnmower." And indeed, that's what he used the goat for, to keep the grass nice and short in front of his hotel. Now, this hotel owner was actually one of the most eccentric men I'd ever met, and I might someday devote an entire podcast to him and to the beautiful village of County, but not today. The goat is pictured in a video that I did years ago, featuring some photos of Ireland, all to the music of a Dublin band called Mutefish, wonderful band. But if you scroll down past the goat, you'll find some of my podcasts. Now, there's another way to do this. If you go to that search box and you type in Random Thoughts from County Antrim, you'll see all of my prior podcasts. And you have to do the full title, Random Thoughts from County Antrim. You cannot merely type Random Thoughts, because I discovered if you do that, what pops up is a bunch of cartoons. The search engine takes you not to me, but to these cartoons, each of which is titled My Random Thoughts. Now, these cartoons might be good, I don't know, but I will tell you that they're not mine. Now, there's yet another way to see my old podcast, my prior podcasts, they're really not that old, is to go to Facebook and type Clandonnell in the Facebook search. And that'll take you to the Clandonnell Facebook page. And then once you scroll down that, you'll see each of my prior podcasts. You can still see them. And I had no idea when I posted these on Facebook that they would stay on Facebook forever. But evidently they do. So that's yet another way to see any of my podcasts, at least until my website. My new website is up and running. Now, my website, website is being done by a young man from Armagh in Northern Ireland. I've known him for several years, and I just know him to be a hardworking, talented, smart guy. Very talented. He's actually a very talented musician, and that's really where I first met him. And I knew he was a software engineer. So I took a look at some of the websites that he has done, and I was very, very impressed. So that's who I hired to do my my new website. Now, you might not think that's amazing, but I do. Certainly we're used to buying products from the other side of the Atlantic or the other side of the Pacific, and we sell products across the ocean. It's a international commerce, obviously. But services are an entirely different matter, and I just find it amazing that I can use a software engineer in Armagh, which is about 3,500 miles away from my home right here. And it's just as easy to use him as it would be to use a software engineer across the street. The only difference is I have to pay him in pounds sterling rather than U.S. dollars. There's also a 5-hour time zone change, so I have to take that into account when he has to take it into account as well when we communicate. But otherwise, there's no different than using someone across the street. And in any event, stay tuned for my new website. So thinking about my website, and again, I want to tell you this is going to be random thoughts, but thinking about my website as I was made me think about Armagh and my last trip there a few years ago. I stayed in an old farmhouse, and it was billed as a bed and breakfast, but it really wasn't. It was a working farm. And the farmer, the proprietor, converted one of his outbuildings into an apartment. And it had a kitchen, had a huge living area, 3 bedrooms, a couple of baths. I mean, it was a wonderful facility and a brilliant setting in the rural area of Armagh. And I loved the stay there. And I stayed there, I think, several days. We used that as a base for doing a number of things while we were in the region. Now, this farm was only a couple of miles from the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And that border is really unrecognizable now. You can travel between north and south without even knowing that you crossed the border. All the old border stations have been dismantled. Even signs saying welcome to this or welcome to that are no longer there. The only way you'd know that you've crossed the border is if you stop and try to buy something. Because the currencies are different. The currency in Northern Ireland, it's part of the United Kingdom, and the currency is the pound sterling, with a picture of the Queen on the paper currency, and the coins for that matter. In the South, the currency is the euro of the European Union, same currency as the continent of Europe. But otherwise, there's no difference between traveling north and south in Ireland as there is traveling between states in the United States. No one stops me when I travel from Michigan and cross the border into Ohio. And that's the way it is in Ireland. Now, that certainly wasn't always the case. It wasn't that long ago that border was very, very heavily guarded. It was patrolled by British soldiers carrying automatic weapons and driving in armored vehicles. The farmer, the proprietor of this B&B that I stayed at, was about my age, which means that he was a young man during the 60s and 70s and 80s and even 90s when the Troubles were intense in Northern Ireland. And I had many conversations with him about those days. And he told me about some of the close calls he had on the border. And I don't think he was an activist or anything, and at least he didn't admit it to me. but he was a young man near the border. And that was enough to be stopped and searched and threatened with some regular frequency during the Troubles. Now, that hard border is eased and eventually ended with the Good Friday Agreement, often called the Belfast Agreement of 1998. As you might guess, the agreement was signed in Belfast on Good Friday. That agreement has had near universal acceptance in Ireland, both North and South. It's led to a peace which is now over 20 years old. And I won't go through the agreement in detail. Maybe I will in a future podcast. But some of those provisions are complex. Some of them are not. But one of them was simply that it allowed the free travel of people and goods and services across the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And that part of the agreement, I think, was made a little easier by the fact that both the UK and the Republic are part of the European Union, or were then part of the European Union. And as with all EU countries, there's no border checks, there's no customs, there's no passport requirements or visa requirements when you cross a border between one EU nation and another. The big question, obviously, is whether Brexit, United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Union, will result in a hard border on the island of Ireland, and whether that could endanger the fragile peace of Northern Ireland. And again, maybe that'll be the subject of a future podcast. But my random thoughts about Armagh and the Troubles made me think about how the world has turned. Because County Armagh was one of the real hot spots during the Troubles, with car bombings and shootings and assassinations and everything else that went on in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. County Antrim in Northern Ireland was a hot spot as well. And now maybe the hot spot is not County Antrim in Ireland. It's County Antrim in Michigan, in the U.S.A. Now, I'm speaking, of course, I think, about the plot of more than a dozen right-wing nuts to kidnap the governor of Michigan. The plan was to kidnap her, take her somewhere else secluded, try her for war crimes or for whatever they pull out of their collective asses, and then execute her. Now, fortunately, the plot was uncovered. In part, that was due to some stellar police work by the FBI and the Michigan State Police. It's also in part due to the incredible ineptness or ineptitudes of the conspirators. Almost laughable ineptitudes. There's been 13 arrested so far, and there may be more soon. And I know if you added up the collective IQs of these 13 men, I think the total would still be in the double digits. But the affair is, it's more than just a bunch of guys fantasizing on the internet. They had very detailed plans. They rehearsed the execution of these plans. They worked on it for at least 4 months. They plotted in the basement of a Michigan vacuum cleaner store where one of the conspirators lived. Yes, indeed. The leader of this conspiracy lived in the basement of a vacuum cleaner store, sharing it with boxes of files and vacuum cleaner parts and whatever else you might put in the basement of a vacuum cleaner store. These guys even bought explosives. They bought an 800,000 volt taser, which they were going to use on the governor. 800,000 volts. That's 16 times the strength of a typical police taser. Now, what they didn't realize when they were plotting all of this in the basement of the vacuum store was that one of the guys in the room was a paid informant of the FBI, and he was recording the entire conversation, every conversation they had in the basement. Now, what does this have to do with County Antrim? Well, these people are from all over the place, mainly Michigan, a few from elsewhere. And I don't know if any of them lived in County Antrim. Maybe. I just don't know yet. The County Antrim in Michigan is a very rural county. What we have more than anything else is cherry orchards and apple orchards, and more than our share of cows. It's not a lot of people. I grew up in a neighborhood in Detroit's West Side, and there were more people in my neighborhood than lived in all of Antrim County. The other thing we have here is a lot of water. It's on Lake Michigan, and there's several other lakes in Antrim County, and they're beautiful lakes. And we have a lot of trees, and we have a lot of hills, as does most of northern Michigan. And that's what makes northern Michigan, I believe, one of the prettiest places on the planet. All of this leads to one of the things we have another plentiful supply of in northern Michigan, and that is second homes. There are an awful lot of people who live in urban and suburban regions of downstate Michigan, and also regions in Illinois and Indiana and Ohio, who have second homes in northern Michigan, particularly Antrim County. Now, one of those who has a second home, I should add, the home that you're looking at behind you, seeing part of my house, I bought this place 20-odd years ago as a second home when I still lived and worked in the Detroit area. I since sold that my principal residence in downstate, and I live full-time here now. But many, many other people have second homes up here. And one of those is the governor of Michigan. She and her husband have a second home up here, not far from where I am right now. And it's on one of the many beautiful lakes in Antrim County. Now, I'm pretty sure I know which house it is, but I'm not going to tell you, because it's not common knowledge. The conspirators did not know where that house was, and they spent many, many days up here trying to find out where it was, and trying to come up with a plan to abduct the governor when she was up here at her second home in County Antrim. Several of them were arrested here in Antrim County last week and doing yet another reconnaissance, and what it turns out to be their last reconnaissance of the area. And more information is going to come out, but it has already turned into somewhat of a parlor game up here. For example, one of the things they were going to do is blow up a bridge in Antrim County, and they were going to use that explosion, part as a diversion, but also to impair the ability of police so that they could make their getaway. And so they purchased explosives, and they practiced by blowing things up in some rural area in Michigan. Or some news actually suggested they were blowing things up in Wisconsin to practice. And the part of the game is trying to figure out which bridge here were they supposed to blow up. And I think I know which one based on the descriptions I'm hearing, but again, I'm not going to tell you which bridge it was. I will tell you, though, I think it would take someone with much more skills in explosions than any of these bozos had. Now, who are these guys? Good question. My theory is they are grown-up children. Simple explanation, and I think it's the right one. Now, I used to play Army when I was a kid, when I was a boy. I could recreate World War II battles with my toy soldiers and my plastic tanks. And my friends and I would often go outside and wear our plastic helmets and our toy guns, and we'd chase each other around playing soldier. Great fun. I have vivid memories of those fun days. I have two sons, and my sons, both of them, generation after me, love going into the woods with paintball guns and playing paintball soldiers, shooting each other with the paintballs. And you see all over the region, you see all over urban areas, you'll see at storefronts, laser tag facilities. And my sons used to love going in and playing laser tag, shooting each other with laser beams. harmless fun. Now, eventually I grew up, and my sons grew up. But these guys did not. They loved going into the woods. They dressed in camo. They loved shooting at trees with automatic weapons. They loved blowing things up in the woods. They're playing at being soldiers. And of course, they're not real soldiers. I mean, real soldiers are highly trained, dedicated individuals. They know it's not a game. They know the dangers they're in and the risks they take, and they know the importance of what they do. And I have nothing but respect for real soldiers. I sometimes have a quarrel with politicians, now or historically, who put soldiers in places maybe they shouldn't be, and ask soldiers to do things maybe they shouldn't be asked to do. But the soldiers themselves, you could have nothing but respect for them. But that's not what these guys are. These are wingnuts who, they're not soldiers at all. They're middle-aged men who like to play dress-up. And they have dreams about being heroes and patriots, and sometimes they get caught up in their own fantasies. And for these guys, they're going to spend the rest of their days in jail. Now, why Michigan, you might ask, or why any other state for that matter? I think for decades now, these right-wing types have been fixated with the federal government. The federal government, in their eyes, is the root of all evil. And the most evil of the evil is the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, who they surely believed were going to take away all their guns. There's many examples of right-wing focus on the ATF and the federal government generally, and I'll just remind you of one of them. And that's Timothy McVeigh, who blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City, killed 168 people in the process. 19 of those were children who were at a daycare center in the federal building. About 700 others were wounded in the blast. Now, McVeigh had no connection with Oklahoma City. He chose that building because the ATF had an office there. And also because he thought he could pull it off, because the building was close enough to the road where he could sneak up a truck filled with explosives and blow it up. But the federal government is no longer the target of these people. Why? Well, they have a fellow traveler in the White House. Our president believes in the same right-wing conspiracies as they do. I mean, that's assuming he believes in anything at all. Personally, I think he's just willing to use these right-wing conspiracies for his own benefit. But so the right-wing nuts have to find another target, and they chose state government. And again, why Michigan? Well, we do have a governor who's been especially forceful in dealing with the coronavirus. Her shutdown orders have been hard, and they've been long. They've been relaxed slowly over the past several months, sometimes ramped back up, and it's been harsh, and it's been painful. My local community, which is actually the local community of her second home, has been like a ghost town this spring. There's been a little bit more life this summer when the second home people came back up and some of the tourists came back up. But now that fall's here, it's beginning to look like a ghost town again. But clearly something had to be done. In southeast Michigan, where most of the people in our state live, was especially hard with the coronavirus. Detroit was a hot spot. Hospitals in Detroit and the surrounding communities were overwhelmed, way past capacity. And no help was coming from Washington, and the White House was largely in denial. Everything was left to the state governors. Now, much can be argued about our state governor's response. I mean, should we have opened up things a little sooner rather than later? Or should restrictions have been statewide, or should have been tailored to regions within the state? The whole question of what was an essential service and what was not is somewhat arbitrary, some sense to it, but also somewhat arbitrary. All of those are legitimate questions, but clearly something had to be done. one of the shutdowns, I was kind of amused by one of the comments I heard by one of the would-be kidnappers. The one thing he objected to the most, the one thing that made our governor a tyrant in his eyes, was that she closed fitness centers. Now, the biggest complaint this man had was that he couldn't go to his local fitness center to work out. Now, you can argue whether or not fitness centers should be open or closed, but the fact is they were closed, and it never occurred to this man with his limited number of brain cells that he could have worked out in the basement of the vacuum cleaner store in which he lived. It never occurred to him, and never crossed his mind that he could call a friend and ask if he could work out in their garage. Closing of the fitness center really left him no choice. There was only one solution he could come up with, and that was to kidnap and kill the governor. Now that's what makes these people so scary. They're both stupid and they're dangerous. Now, the president didn't much like our governor either. I don't think he likes any woman exercising any authority. He couldn't even refer to it. He hasn't even referred to her by name. He calls her that woman from Michigan. Which is kind of funny because people here have taken that label as a point of pride. I've seen bumper stickers and signs that says, "I'm proud to have voted for that woman from Michigan." He also tweeted not too long ago that we need to liberate Michigan. Now, neither our president nor any of these right-wing nuts have tried to liberate us from the coronavirus. They took it another way. They tried to liberate us from our elected governor. But that's the way they think. So I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to wrap this up with a couple of comments. I don't think it was our governor's fault that this nut couldn't go to his fitness center. And it wasn't our governor's fault that we couldn't do all the stuff in 2020 that we used to do way back in 2019. Personally, I wouldn't blame it on the governor. I'd blame it on the virus. And I'll add this to that. I mean, it was a difficult spring and summer, and it's still difficult here in the autumn. But one thing is enlightening, I think, in our approach to this, and that is our schools are open. I have a granddaughter who goes to school every day in Michigan, Monday through Friday. I think enough of us here did the right thing, and by us I mean government officials, citizens, businesses, organizations. Enough of us did the right thing that we kind of kept this in reasonable control. There's spikes going up again. It's not done, but reasonably in control, so that it is reasonably safe for our children to go to school. Now, you can't say that about every region in the country. There were many, many parts of the country where they were hell-bent on making the spring and summer of 2020 exactly as it was in the spring and summer of 2019. Everything had to be the same during the pandemic as it was before the pandemic. And then they seemed shocked. Shocked when the schools could not open safely. So shocked that these same government officials in those parts of the country threatened to cut off funding to any school that wouldn't reopen in September. And I guess that's one approach. Rather than helping schools open in the middle of a pandemic, helping them make things safe for school children, just threaten them. Cut off funding if they don't. And I guess that's the same approach they had to everything else. Don't help people adjust to life in a pandemic so that we can all do the best we can under difficult circumstances. Just open everything up so that everything's the same today as it was last year. Now, personally, I think I'd rather live in a state that's governed by that woman from Michigan So that's my podcast for today. I got some stories lined up to tell you next week. I've already got it planned. Hopefully I have my website by then. So please join me next week, same time at 6 o'clock on Sunday for Random Thoughts from County Antrim. And in the meantime, please stay smart, stay safe, and do the right thing. Goodbye.